Hello, Alton from MicroGrinder.com here doing a free leak finder review video for one of my students on Udemy. We have here today a video submitted by Paul. He's a student in my Developing Poker Reads course on Udemy, and what he's doing is playing two tables of 6 max on 888 poker. Table here on the left is 6-L and the table on the right is 10-L. So for those of you that aren't aware, all students of my paid courses on Udemy, once you complete a certain percentage of the course and finish some other requirements, all you have to do is submit a video for a free leak finder review, and I'll do a free 20-minute free leak finder review for you. So let's go ahead and get started with the action. So looks like Paul has pocket aces first hand, and looks like he's going for the raise. Definitely like that. Now for the size in the raise, I think it's a bit too big, and I don't hate it, but I would prefer a bit of a smaller raise because we want our opponent to call. What's interesting is based upon the initial raisers or initial limpers HUD stats, his VPIP is 17, his preflop raise is 13. I know we only have 25 hands on him, but he's looking like a nit, but it's oddly enough, he's limping in, and I think he's limping in with a fairly strong range. So if we think that he's going to call a larger raise, then that's great. But if we don't know, I would just opt for a standard 3 big blinds plus 1 for the limper, especially because we're in position and we have pocket aces and we do want to call. We know that he's playing a fairly tight range, so we want him to call and hopefully flop something like a pair of kings or pair of queens as a top pair, good kicker on the board, or we have pocket aces and we can stack them or get a decent amount of their stack size. So with 30 cents we may end up getting a fold, and let's see what happens. And looks like he's time banking it, thinking about it. So he must have had a semi-decent hand, but he's just a nit, and he's very risk adverse. So maybe he had something like pair of 3s, pair of 4s, a pair of 5s. I think if you made it 24 cents, you might have gotten a call. So consider that next time when you make a raise. Jack 8 offsuit, like the fold. I think certain type of good lag type of players can open Jack 8 off in the cutoff, but it really is dependent upon the players at the tables. And let's go ahead, and I'm going to pause the video one more time. It looks like he picks up aces again, and I just want to talk a bit about a table and seat selection. So our 6-0 game over here, it looks like it's full of a lot of really tight type of opponents. We have a 14-7 over here. We have 1.2k hands on him, so this guy's a complete nit. This opponent's looking like to be a weak type passive opponent. This guy's looking like to be he's a 47-14, so he's a loose passive type of opponent, and he looks to be a bit of a calling station because he's only folding to about 42% of C bets. And then down here we have another nit. He's a 10-6. And then again, we have, this guy looks to be a bit of a weak type of a nitty tag, a 23-15. So on this table, the 6-L, it looks like we have one bad player, which is this opponent here, and everybody else seems to be fairly tight. So, in terms of table quality, it's not that great, simply because you really want to be directly to the left of the fish. So you'd want to be ideally here, and if not here, you'd want to be here because you want to be in direct position to him. And now let's look at this table. Let's look at your 10-L. We have a complete nit over here in 1913. We have, again, another nit, a 13-8. We have another nit here, a 1910, a 13-5 for another nit over here, a 16-12, and an unknown right here, and then an 18-13 and a 21-15. So everybody on this table either looks like a complete nit or a nitty tag. So my first suggestion on the 10-L table is just get up from the table and do some table and seat selection and find a better table to sit at. So I know we talk about that in the class, but that's a really important aspect of making money, and I know that there are some soft games on 888. So first plan of action is table and seat selection. Get off of a table like this. You don't want to be playing at a table with a bunch of nits and really tight, aggressive type of opponents that are nitty as well, because you're really not going to extract that much value, and they're not going to make that many mistakes because they're risk adverse. You're not going to get that much money out of them. So, take a look at that when you're playing. Pocket aces, like standard raise here. We did call by a 13-8. So just assuming whenever anybody calls here, they have a fairly tight range in general. And looks like big blind is pondering a call. Like the c-bet here, and like the 3/4 pot, a very wet board texture. We can get value from pair nines, we can get value from straight draws, flush draws, so pretty good spot there to c-bet. And I like your sizing, so the wetter the board texture, the bigger we need to go. It looks like you're picking up some hands, so now we have pocket kings under the gun. Always nice to start off a session getting aces twice and kings twice in a matter of, you know, pretty much less than an orbit. So again, we have this 14-8 calling us again. Very interesting that he's flatting us. I'm really kind of uncertain what his range is, other than it's fairly tight. And again, I like the standard 3/4 of a pot bet because we have the straight draw on the board for the gutter for the straight draw, and we have the flush draw, and it's always nice to turn top set. And since he called 3/4 pot bet on the flop, just keep bombing away for value. So good play there. Way to get value out of those hands. It looks like he's sitting down on the third table. Hopefully he tiles them so we can see all of them, and since they're not tiled, we'll just focus on the top two tables. So 10-9 offsuit, see what you do with that in the big blind. Like the fold. So we have the fish in the pot that's limping, like the check there. And we pick up an up-down straight draw here on the turn. Be interesting to see what you do. If small blind doesn't lead out, this would definitely be a good spot for you to semi-bluff here on the turn. And it looks like you're going for about half pot size bet. Yeah, I think about half pot size or maybe even a little larger is a good sizing there. Simply because we're happy to get calls, but we're even more happier to get folds. So when he min raises you, I don't think you can ever fold here. And that's a good call. And unfortunately, you miss out. So like the raise for the limper here, it looks like this guy, let me pause the video. It looks like he's turning to be a habitual limper, but his stats seem to be fairly tight. You know, we only have 7 hands on him, so we can't really look at his HUD stats other than think that maybe he's limping, you know, a semi-strong range, but he's not always limping the nuts. So given that it's 7 hands, we just look at him as a bit of a weak passive player that's limping, and we don't know if he's limping a wide range or if he's limping a tight range. With Big Slick, I definitely like the raise, but I would like to make it a bit larger because we're out of position. So I like to make it 3 big blinds plus 1 per the limper, and then when I'm out of position, I like to add on an additional big blind. So I would have made this 50 cents against his opponent. But, you know, nothing wrong with the 40 cents there. And it looks like you're firing out a c-bet, so I don't think you need to always c-bet here. When you are c-betting here, you're going to have to go with the story. The reason, you know, the story that you have a strong pocket pair. Now, it looks like you're double barreling and you're representing a good strong pocket pair. Let's go ahead and pause the video. And the one thing in regards to c-betting on this flop is understanding if you have a lot of fold equity or not. It's a really dry flop, and when he calls your c-bet on the flop, you know, he usually has a pocket pair, and when it turns a 9, you're never getting a pair of 9s to fold. You might get a pair of 5s, pair of 6s, pair of 7s, pair of 8s, and some broadways that he floated you with to fold. But just think about fold equity. I know this guy's a bit of unknown, but once you see bet on the flop, you had to go with a double barrel. So I like the double barrel there. But just don't always think that because you raised the limper pre-flop that you need to continue with the c-bet on the flop, because it's hard for you to represent much on this flop other than pretty much jacks plus, or maybe even like 10s plus. But just remember that, you know, you're pretty much going to probably have to triple barrel to try to get him to fold as a bluff once you represent that big pair on the flop. And sometimes it's okay to fire out one barrel and give up as well, and sometimes it's okay just to check as well. So the one downside with playing standard games here, and I like the check with the king 8 suited, not much going on there, not strong enough to raise the limper. And then that's a good good standard fold there. You don't beat much in his value range at all unless he just has a jack. And it looks like the 47-14 is limping in. So against the opponent that's limping such a wide range, you could also consider isolating him with your ace-4 offsuit. I know it's a really weak ace, but since we know that he's limping a super wide range of 47%, and let me actually pull that up in Equilab just to show you while we have some downtime. So here's a 47% range. Since we know he's limping a really wide range, probably something like this, we can isolate a bit wider, so that's something to consider as well. But, I don't hate the fold. I think the fold is fine as well. So it looks like we have a bit of some dead action. I'm going to fast forward a bit in the video, try to get some hands in here. So like the fold there, like the fold with the 5-3. Make sure that we get as much in here as we can. Jack 6 off, Jack 5 off. Looks like you're folding both of those, so that's good. And looks good with the fold. Not many value hands going on here, and like the good standard fold with 9-10 off, not being tempted just to flat out of position. Like the fold with the 8 deuce. And king 9 offsuit, this would be interesting to see if you defend or not. And he folds, so nothing going on there anyways. So we have multiple limpers and min raise, and you have big slick in the cutoff, and it looks like you're going to be making a 3-bet there to the min raise, and I like your 3-bet. I think the sizing's fine because we want to charge the limper as well. You could potentially make it a bit smaller, but I like sizing it a bit on the larger side because you're basing it upon his potential. You're not basing it upon his raise size, but you should be basing it upon trying to get value off a big slick if you think he's going to call. And then on this flop, yeah, you just have to make the fold there. You really don't have anything on that flop. But getting back to sizing, so he min raised it. You could just base it upon a standard 3x open, and if we based it on 18 cents and made it around 2.8, that would be about 50 cents. And you based it based upon he put 12 cents in the pot and you made it 42, I believe. So I think that sizing is fine as well, but you probably could have made it even a little larger than that if you knew that he would call that raise. And it's really villain dependent when I talk about your 3-bet sizing, because if you think that they're going to call a larger 3-bet, then go ahead and do it. But if you don't think they are, then go ahead and fold. And this guy limped before and you raised with aces and he folded. So I think that the smaller 3-bet is fine. And I would consider overlimping here because we want to get in with the fish, and everybody's been showing to be fairly passive and weak. And I like the overlimp there. Good move there. I don't think it's likely you're going to get squeezed at these tables. Everybody in here seems to be so nitty and tight. And that's a great flop for you. Like the raise with the 9s. Now, sizing wise, I think it's a bit small just because of the board texture. Let me go ahead and pause the video and take it back a little bit. So you made a half pot bet and you got called by a 14-8. The reason why I like a bit of a larger bet when you're representing that queen is that this is a bit of a wet board texture because Jack 9, Jack 10, hearts, any 2 hearts, all those, you're going to get called by gutter straight draws, you're going to get called by flush draws, so you can get called by lots of worse. And if they don't have a queen, they're going to call you a decent amount of the time. So, I would consider, making it around 2/3 pot bet because you are value betting your 9s. Yeah, queens are in his range, but also all those other cards that are worse are also in his range as well. So we want to maximize fold equity, and on such a wet board texture, I know it doesn't look that wet, but with the flush and the gutter straight draw, it's semi-wet, so I'd go for around 2/3 pot. But I think in general, half pot size bet's okay. Definitely like the bet here as a semi-bluff. You flop middle pair with the flush draw. So I don't mind the bet here, but I also don't mind checking back because I don't think you have any fold equity. When he calls on the flop here, the king doesn't change much unless he calls you with a pair of 8s, where he could potentially have you outkicked. But if he has a pair of aces, I don't think he's ever folding. So you're not going to get better to fold, and you may not potentially most of the time get worse to call. So you can consider checking here as well on the turn rather than firing out a second bullet. And he checks, and I like the check there because you're not going to get value from anything else. And luckily enough, he had the flush that was 1 heart lower than yours, so ended up working out for you there. But if he ended up having an ace, if he ended up having a stronger 8, you're not going to get him to fold that on the turn a majority of the time, especially when he tends to be a bit of a calling station. So just consider that when you are semi-bluffing, is that look at the opponents, and this guy is a loose passive calling station. Remember, in general, we don't want to be bluffing loose passive calling stations unless we have a lot of equity, and you had a decent amount of equity there with your pair and the flush draw. Like the fold with the 10-5 off. Ace-Jack offsuit and pocket aces. There we go. You're getting aces a lot, like the 3x. Always nice to get aces a decent amount of the time. You have a 15-7 raising under the gun. This is a bit of an interesting spot for ace-jack, and I like the disciplined fold there because his range is really strong, and ace-jack off isn't going to do well against that range a decent percentage of the time. You're really going to find yourself in a dominated type of situation where you're going to be outkicked. And here, I definitely like the 3/4 pot size bet. You got the flush draw and the straight draw in here, and you can get called by kings, so good bet there. So I think we are getting close to 19 minutes, so I have to stop this before we get to 20 minutes for Udemy. So let's go ahead and see how the kings play out, and then we'll be done with this. Let's go ahead and hope everybody doesn't take up their whole time bank. I like a 3-bet here, and I would make it around 2.8x, 30 cents to 80 cents. Yeah, that's good. Actually, sorry, you're out of position. No, you actually are in position on the button. So yeah, I like that. I like that sizing a lot. Now let's look at his stats. He's a 21-15. So I don't like the c-bet here, and let me go ahead and pause the video real quick, and let me tell you why I don't like the c-bet. Because when you c-bet there, he's only going to call you with ace-x, which is in a lot of his range, and then everything else that is in his range is going to fold. So all of his queens, his jacks, his 10s, his 9s, those are all hands that are going to fold that we could potentially get value on later streets. But anyways, we are running up onto 30 seconds or so before this video is going to cut off and reach the 20-minute mark, but pretty good play. Just take note of the different comments I had throughout the video. So thanks for watching. It's been Alton with MicroGrinder.com. We'll see you at the next video.